Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for coming to this meeting of the climate. A little bit of feedback there. This meeting of the Climate Change and Nature Recovery Service Transformation Committee. I am going to ask us to do introductions, if that's okay. I'd like to first of all thank Ishmael and Sheila for joining us as members of the public who've come particularly with an interest in agenda item 4 on the reusable containers. But for the benefit of everybody in the room, because we've got some different faces to last time, if we could just do a quick whiz round. So Rebecca Fogarty, councillor for West Cross and the chair of this committee, and I'll go to my right.
Yeah, Gareth Bosden from Democratic Services.
Jonathan Wills from Legal Services.
Good afternoon, I'm Ben George. I'm Programme Manager with Transport for Wales, looking after South West Wales.
Councillor Mike Baker, Pendary.
Good afternoon, I'm Matt Bowyer, Group Leader for Traffic and Network Infrastructure for Council.
Matthew Perkins, Group Leader, Waste Management.
Chris Howell, Head of Waste Parks and Cleansing.
Councillor Cyril Anderson, Cabinet Member for Waste Management.
Councillor David Hopkins, Cabinet Member for Performance and Corporate Services, also Deputy Leader.
Andrew Stevens, Councillor Andrew Stevens, Cabinet Member for Environment and Infrastructure.
Thank you. And coming online, Jeff.
Good afternoon, everybody. Jeff Bacon, Head of Property Services.
Thank you. Hannah.
Hi, Councillor Hannah Lawson, Vice Chair of the committee and Councillor for Castle Ward.
Thank you. Paul.
Paul Muller, Natural Environment Section Manager.
Thank you. And Caroline?
My colleague from
Oh, yes, sorry. Deb.
Hi, yeah, Deb Hill, Nature Conservation Team Leader in Paul's section.
Thank you. Angela?
Hi there, Councillor Angela O'Connor for Mumbles Ward.
Thank you. You're all leaping about on my screen now, but Phil?
Phil John, Project Manager in Property Services.
Mark?
Hi there, Mark Barber, Biodiversity Officer and Joint Local Nature Partnership Coordinator.
Thank you. And I think this is last but not least, Christina.
Hi, yeah, Christina, so Local Nature Partnership Coordinator alongside Mark in Deb Hill's team.
Lovely. Great to see so many faces on such an important agenda. I hope I haven't missed anybody out. So moving on to the agenda as it is in front of us. So first of all, have we got any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, from Councillor Keaton and Councillor Phillips.
Thank you. And are there any disclosures of personal or prejudicial interests? Councillor Rice? Okay, for those online, that was a personal interest in item 6. Hopefully we've all had a chance to have a look at the minutes of the last meeting. Somebody willing to propose and second those as a truth? Thank you. That was Councillor Baker and a seconder. Was that a wave of the hand, Councillor O'Connor? Yes, great. Okay. All agreed on those? Yep. Excellent. Thank you. Right then, I will swiftly move us on to our first substantive item this afternoon. So the use of reusable containers for recycling. Shall I hand over to you, Councillor Anderson, for an introduction?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks to the committee for their invite this afternoon. I'm sure they've read the report that's in front of you, Chair, and the report asks the committee to give their views on the use of the reusable containers instead of the old single-use bags. Secondly, I'd like to thank Chris and Matthew for all their hard work in getting all the all the things together so that we can discuss this and take it forward for the near future. I'll hand over to Chris in a moment.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I won't go through the report line by line. Recycling performance in Swansea has gone from strength to strength, with that increased recycling providing excellent carbon reduction benefits. It's a few years ago now that we introduced reusable containers for our plastic bottles, tubs and trays. And now the service area is looking to explore whether or not a similar approach would be appropriate for both cans and glass collections and paper and card collections, which are currently in our green single-use bags. Collecting with reusable containers, it does make the collection slightly slower, so we would need additional collection crews, although it does simplify the recycling process because we would no longer need to debag the material. So we believe that it would be a cost-neutral initiative. Most councils across Wales use reusable containers for collecting dry recyclables. They either use plastic boxes, hessian sacks, or a combination of the two. So what we're interested in is first of all, is where the committee are supportive of the move, exploring and moving forward with the move to reusable containers instead of single-use plastic, and also to gain the committee's views on the range of design options available. So it's probably worthwhile now if we show you the range of designs that are used out there, what we think are our preferred options, and see what the committee think. Looking at plastic boxes.
Sorry to interrupt. I can't see any of you. The screen has gone as if it's only on audio.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It is. We have got it on, Angela, but yeah, but you can hear everything, right?
Yeah, I could see you at the beginning of the meeting, and I can actually hear you now, so it's okay to carry on. Apologies for interrupting. It's just if you were going to share your screen, we wouldn't be able to see it.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, the intention is actually to share physical items, and I was hoping that the cameras would zoom on at least a mic so that we could get a more close-up image, but it doesn't seem to be doing that today.
Can you just press your side visually? Oh, yes,
It's on there.
Yeah.
Right, what we're going to do for those online is those in the room are going to have opportunity to sort of obviously see, and I think Chris, you're going to talk us through pros and cons of each of these. Meanwhile, Councillor Stevens is running around to see if we can find a camera that will zoom in for you. But if not, we'll just have to describe in detail for you. Okay, so I'll hand back to Chris.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, we'll try and be as descriptive as possible. Looking at the plastic boxes first, it's the service area's preference to use a box rather than a hessian sack for our cans and glass. And one of the key reasons is one of safety. So if a glass bottle breaks and is put out by residents, there's a risk of that plastic bottle piercing through the hessian sack. But with a plastic box, it's far more robust. And there's two general designs in use around the country. The first one, which Cyril has in its hands now.
How do I mute this? I'm gonna...
On mute. Sorry, thank you for showing us. I can't hear anything though, but yeah.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, no.
Yeah, now I can. Hello.
Well, that's strange. Right. It's only because when I turn my.
Sorry, as soon as we got your eyes, David, then we couldn't hear anything else.
So I'm not saying nothing normally.
You didn't say anything at all.
Hey, yeah, that's at home now. Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Okay, can you hear us online? Yes, that was a yes, good. Right, I am going to unadjourn. What's the opposite of adjourn? Restart the meeting. Okay, so now when Chris puts his mic on, you should also be able to see Cyril in the background showing you the design of container that he's talking about.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Hopefully, yeah, Cyril will be able to move in a bit closer. So there's two designs of plastic boxes mainly in use across the country. The one that Cyril's holding now doesn't have any handles. It's quite a low box. So when that is full of cans and glass, both the resident and our operatives have to bend quite close to the floor to pick it up. So that's a manual handling issue. And then as you're carrying it, you are holding it at waist height with a box of cans and glass in front of you. So if somebody tripped, we feel that, again, that is not a good design of the box. So this is one of the boxes readily available, but it's not our preferred option. If Cyril grabs the one which we prefer, this is a smaller footprint box, but it's taller and it comes with a carrying handle. So when both residents and our operatives are carrying it, they're only lifting the box a couple of inches off the floor. And then if somebody stumbles, the box just drops a couple of inches to the floor. So it makes it much safer. And that is our preferred style of box. With surveys that we've undertaken as to how many bags of cans and glass that people put out, this size of box that we have here would cater for the vast majority of our residents, only needing one box. Obviously, there are exceptions to the rule, and sometimes people put up more bags of cans and glass. So our intention would be to provide one per household initially, and then allow residents to request a second one on an exceptions basis. So that is the service area's preferred option for the reusable container for cans and glass if we proceed down that road. Then coming to the Hessian sacks. Hessian sacks.
Sorry, Cyril. Sorry, Cyril. Do you mind if we just finish the presentation of all the, and then we'll have discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. With the Hessian sacks, they come in many designs, and the designs have developed over time. Previously, including our own pink sacks for plastic bottle tubs and trays, they used to be quite square with a flap lid, which would never hold down properly, and it would depend on how full the box, the bag was, as to what shape it maintained and how well it kept the weather out. So we've moved away from that design, and our newer bags for paper and card, they don't have a flap lid. The top of the bag itself velcros together and is far more secure and far more waterproof. We also have slightly different versions from other authorities where the top section of the bag in its entirety folds over and makes it even more watertight. So, and in terms of also different sizes of bags, we have slightly smaller bags for those who with small households or who don't maybe have assisted lifts, where people don't have are not unable to carry the waste out at all. But if they are less able, we provide smaller bags so they're more manageable for residents who need smaller bags. And we provide smaller bags for those with smaller properties, so they have less storage space, particularly flats. So in terms of an option for paper and card, I suppose what we're asking the committee to consider is whether or not a Hessian sack is suitable, and whether as a service area we should strive to have the right combination of keeping the weather out of it so the paper and card stays dry, and actually having it the right size so that even if the paper and card gets damp or slightly wet, it doesn't get too heavy for both the residents and our carriers to lift. In terms of the bag that Cyril's holding now, that is probably on the large side. That will hold about 4 green bags of paper and card. On average, residents put out just over 2 bags of paper and card. So we would look for something slightly smaller than that if we went with a bag. Another opportunity which we've considered when consulting with our staff as well is to use a box for paper and card as well, but not a box like exactly the same as the cans and glass, which hasn't got a lid, but one with would look like a large food caddy. So it would be an integral lid, so it doesn't get lost. And when that lid is closed and the handle is put up, it locks the lid in place. So again, we're not aware of anybody using that style of container across the country. So what we would need to do would be to go to manufacturers, get them to mock up a design for us, a bespoke design, so then we could assess its practicalities and its cost, because the boxes are a lot more expensive than the bags. So what we're asking for you really is views on the different style of design of both box and bag, and whether you're happy that we continue to explore and we're along the right lines in the direction we're heading.
Okay, Councillor Stevens.
Just to come in quick, thanks, Chair. Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation, Chris. It was an excellent presentation and fantastic effort by Councillor Anderson on showing us all the bags. Just 1 or 2 points to make as Cyril's introduced the report. It's just that, you know, what didn't come up there was that we use an awful lot of green bags, and so which is, let's face this, it's single-use plastic bags, and you know, given our recycling rate, and our recycling rate is actually over 70%, and I believe one of the best in Wales. Is that right? So it seems a bit of a no-brainer to me to move towards the multi-use bags, you know, in order to cut down on our plastic use anyway. So it's but I would be interested to hear the committee's thoughts on the specific types of boxes and bags.
Okay, great. What I'm going to suggest we do is just adjourn again for 3 or 4 minutes, just for those who are in the room, so committee members and members of the public, to actually go and have a look properly at the physical containers that are in front of us, because let's use that opportunity while it's here. So people online, think of your questions and your comments while we do that, and we'll come back and we'll be able to feed in those views then, if that's okay. All right. Please be seated. Thank you. So thanks ever so much to everybody who's sort of brought that presentation, and for actually having the physical examples in the room. I think it's really helpful. So I'll take questions first of all, if anybody's got any like technical questions, and then if we can move on to, you know, what our thoughts are. So first of all, online, you've had plenty of time to think about it. Have you got questions, Councillor O'Connor?
Hi there, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of questions about the, I think the taller, slimmer one is slightly better than the shorter, wider one, in order for obviously elderly picking it up, etc. But the taller, slimmer one, would we be entitled to having possibly 3 of those? I know that I would easily go through more than 1 of those each week, you know, with a young family. I don't know whether there's the option for us, if you know you're going to get through a lot, a bigger wheelie version of that. I appreciate, obviously it's very heavy when you've got a load of glasses and tins and bottles, so maybe more of the smaller version, or maybe one wheelie version for those who feel like they're going to need more. Would that be an option? First question.
Yeah, thanks. On the surveys that we've undertaken out on the streets, the average number of green bags for cans and glasses is just over 1.2. If people, so that's why we propose giving people 1 box to start with, and then they can ask for more. They hold between 1 and 2 green bags, depending on how full they are. So the vast majority of houses would manage with 1, we feel, but people can have 2 if they want to. If somebody had a need for 3, then we wouldn't have any issue with people having 3. But what we would ask residents to do is to squash their cans so they take up less space. We wouldn't be keen to have larger wheelie bins, because they need a bin lift on the back of a lorry, which our vehicles, you move into a different type of collection then. And then, you know, a lot of streets in Swansea are very steep. There's a lot of steps around. So we would look to stick with sort of manually carried boxes as opposed to wheeled boxes.
Thank you. Did you?
Sorry.
Did you have another question?
Yeah, and are they stackable? So I know the shorter, wider ones they had in East Talbot before, they were actually stackable, which is quite handy if you had more than 1 for storing. Would that be the case with the slimmer second version that you showed?
They're not stackable when full. They will sit inside each other. So if you had 2, they could be slotted into each other. But then when you fill 1, you then got a second one. Because they're taller, it wouldn't be that stable necessarily, one sitting on top of the other. So they're not stackable as full boxes.
Sorry, yeah, just for clarification, when empty they are. Thank you.
When empty, yeah, one can slot inside the other.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Rice?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I think it's really quite heartwarming to see something practical come along and actually look at how we would use them. I've got 3 technical questions, I think. First one is to do with the financial implications. Have you done any modelling at the moment? I've seen a bit written in 4.1 about the potential cost of this versus what you currently do, because there's obviously going to be quite a big capital outlay to buy all of these plastics. The second one really would be, have you looked at the impact that there would be on potential recycling rates if they were to dip, and would match maybe those authorities that are using a similar process now? It may be that because we're so flexible and easy that we've got high rates, and you know the potential cost that would be on landfill, because I can imagine some scenarios, unfortunately, where people would move to put things in black bags because it would be easier for them. And the final one really is, have you looked at a place or potential places or a sizable trial to see how it would work first, rather than a full rollout at once? Because I think you'll probably be able to iron out some of the problems that way. I know, you know, without being too parochial, my area, there would be potential issues that would definitely need to be addressed before it would roll out there. Thank you.
Yeah, with the cost modelling, we've had discussions with just very initial discussions with Welsh Government. Moving to reusable containers is in line with the Welsh Government blueprint and the way that Welsh Government went every authority to collect. And it's likely that we would get some funding for the initial capital purchase of containers. Thereafter, we believe that it'll be virtually cost neutral, if slightly cheaper. In terms of that modelling, we'd still have to replace boxes as they get damaged or lost or just life expired. But then that'll be offset by us buying over 10 million single-use green bags every year. We'd have additional collection costs because it'll be slightly slower, because you've got to take the boxes back to the houses. But those increased collection costs then are offset by reduced debagging costs, and potentially even having the material itself slightly higher quality, which increases its value. So we believe it's cost neutral, and we're confident that we'd get support for the initial capital outlay. In terms of impact on recycling rates, it is a really good question, and the truth is we don't know. Behaviour is very difficult to accurately predict. However, again, it's the Welsh Government blueprint, the way that the Welsh Government expect all authorities to move towards in terms of how they collect it. And there's always a balance between, even if there's a slight reduced recycling performance, that you have the environmental benefits of the way you're collecting it. But we have nothing to suggest that there would be a drop in recycling rate. We still have our 3-bag limit in place. We have our Keep Recycling Out campaign in place. So people still won't be allowed to put recyclable material in their black bag. And as part of that rollout, we would need to have very effective sort of promotion campaign, which comes with sort of both education and enforcement as part of that promotion campaign. So it's a really good question, but we certainly don't anticipate a significant drop. In terms of a trial, I'm just going to be honest, we haven't considered a trial. We trialed areas when we rolled out the reusable pink sacks, and I think that's something I'd be discussing with the cabinet members and Matt and the team, because it can come with difficulties in terms of effectiveness of purchasing materials, particularly if you're relying on a grant, but it has a lot of advantages as well, because it does allow you to iron out particular flaws in it. So I think we'd need to give that really good consideration as a good suggestion.
Okay, are there any other questions before I invite comments? Hannah, sorry, Councillor Lawson.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to know really what was the cost implication for members of the public? Would they be expected to pay if they wanted additional boxes, or if they needed to replace any that were broken or lost outside, or would that cost be absorbed?
It would work exactly like our containers now, where there's no additional cost to residents. The only thing that residents need to pay for now is our garden waste bags, and that is a choice to use or not, but that there would be no expectation of residents paying for any replacement or additional containers.
Okay, last question, Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you. Sorry, just 2 quick ones. One was there's no lid. I didn't see a lid for the black one for the tins and bottles, and was there a specific reason as to why with that one? And the garden sacks that you currently pay for £2.50, they don't seem as weighted as the Hessian bags. They seem to just blow away, and I'm just wondering if the cost would, if you'd be reconsidering the cost of bringing them down for the garden waste bags.
I believe that our garden waste bags have they are, I believe they're weighted, certainly the new ones we have, but it is a slightly smaller weight than that's currently in our pink bags. I didn't quite catch the last point of the question, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, no, because I know that ours blown away basically a couple of times because they don't seem as weighted as the other Hessian bags. So it would be good if they could be a little bit more weighted. But the first question was the lid on the plastic boxes for the tins and bottles. Was there a reason why there wasn't a lid? I was just wondering.
Yeah, no, thanks for reminding me. Yeah, so with the garden waste bags, it is a balance, because garden waste itself can be quite heavy. So it's trying to have some weighting to stop them blowing away when they've been emptied, with not them being adding to the weight of people having to carry their garden waste out. In terms of the not having a lid on the cans and glass, it's quite simple. That cans and glass don't deteriorate in the weather. The boxes have holes in them, so the rainwater doesn't stay in them and fill up. And that design is used in I think there's 18 other authorities who use reusable containers across the board, and that design is kind of well established. And even if they use the small short boxes, they tend not to come with the lids, because the lids get easily lost unless they're like a food cardier lid, which is hinged and attached, the other lids tend not to last very long. So it's by design not having a lid, because one, it doesn't get lost, and there's no real benefit to having the lid there.
And I'm under the impression that we're all presuming that these bins will be kept in people's houses and only brought out when they need to be collected, as opposed to people storing them outside and not maybe rinsing them through or anything to attract rats.
I think it would be a resident's choice where they store their containers and how well they look after them, I guess. Often the large food cardies are left outside by residents in gardens. It depends on the circumstances of the resident. We provide much smaller Hessian sacks for people who live in flats, for example, where they have no external storage, and then they use the small bags to take to communal collection points. Yeah, so it really will depend on each resident's circumstances.
Okay, I'm going to move us towards feedback, but Councillor Rice has indicated, so.
Just one very quick point really on that. In terms of picking up Councillor O'Connor's point, the purpose for the lid would be probably a safety purpose, I would have thought, in many reasons, because if you filled that, I can imagine, say for example, a student household or somebody trying to fill it so that it would mound up over the top of the natural top of the lid. So you'd have so many, and carrying it away or moving it would become quite dangerous. So that might give you a sort of expectation of what the full amount is.
Yeah, no, I understand the point. I think that it is a concern, and that's why we would prefer the box to have a handle. And unfortunately, lids, if people want to put more in it, they won't use the lid. And some of the short boxes, they can come with lids, but when you visit other authorities, they're very rarely used for any length of time. It's a lid would have to be hinged, and when we shared about the option of having a reusable box for paper and card, we really would only look at one with a hinged option, because then it does do the both of creates a bit of a fill level, but then it won't get lost, and that's the lids. Honestly, the experience of most authorities around Wales is that the lids are not used.
Okay, thank you. I just want to ask our members of the public at the back if there's any feedback that you wanted to give. You come kind of representing different groups within the Swansea population, so if you don't, that's okay. It's just an opportunity. If you do, you'll need to move towards where there's a microphone.
Right. I just wonder whether if you go to this system, it will inhibit how much you can consider collecting refuse less often and that sort of thing. And I definitely don't like the open box for cans and bottles. I mean, I'm very conscious, being older, that if I can't see my feet, I'm liable to stumble. Whereas with this, provided I don't have too many bottles in it, I can lift that quite nicely.
So are you saying you prefer the one with the handle?
Yeah, definitely.
Than the one without the handle?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
That's really helpful. Thank you. So just for the scope of the discussion today, what we're talking about is just like for like replacement in a sense, isn't it? We're not talking about any change to the collection routine or anything like that. It's just, what is currently collected will be collected in something else. So I hope that sort of reassures you on that point, and thank you for your feedback on the boxes. That's really helpful. Did you want to come in at all, Ishmael? Did you want to say anything? Okay, great. That was, for those online, that was I'm quite happy with what I've seen so far, so that's really helpful. Sorry. Okay, so coming to councillors then. So Councillor O'Connor, you're indicating?
Sorry, it was just going back to the lid one more time. So I'm just thinking about it. So we put our rubbish out to be collected, and there is a bin that's full of glass bottles and there's no lid on it, and it gets knocked over by a small child or a dog, and then it's all over the grass or all over the pavement, I think that's quite dangerous. Sorry, I'm just visually imagining that that's bound to happen at some house somewhere and on more than one occasion.
Do you want to respond to each point of feedback, or do you want me to take a few perspectives? And let's do the second, if that's okay, and then you can kind of come back to any points that raise concern. Anybody else online want to give their view on any of it? Councillor Lawson, I think that might actually only be you. Did you want to come in?
No, if I've got my hand up, that's a legacy hand, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Anybody in the room? Yep, Councillor Baker.
I'm not so keen on the boxes, but Hessian sacks, I do think they're absolutely brilliant. If for glass and tin, we could find a thicker, not too heavy, Hessian isn't heavy. So if we could get a thicker Hessian bag, so if glass breaks in, it does not go through the Hessian sack. At the moment, we don't have many accidents with the green bags, with the glass and tin. And I reckon I've dragged through the house my plastics when my hands have been bad, and I just drag it through. With a box like that, or with that type, with no lid on, I feel very insecure at carrying that through my house. Because there's only one way through from my back where my storage area is from the recycling. It's through my house, out to the front.
Okay.
And larger families, like they are a few families with 6 children. So you can just imagine the amount of recycling they put out. I know one person got 3 pink bags because that's the amount of plastic they go through with plastic bottles for the children and so forth. The amount of black bags she puts out as well. I think one of them should have to end up with about 7 of them.
Okay, thank you. If there's nobody else indicating, I'll say what I think, if that's all right. So I really support the taller. First of all, can I just say, I think it's really admirable that we're moving to reusable containers. And the figure in the report, just to reiterate, is 10 million single-use bags that we'll be saving. I think that's a really, really laudable ambition. So just to say that, first of all. I'm glad that in a way you kind of almost moved on from the lower plastic box, because I think that flags all sorts of manual handling issues. The one with the handle, I'm glad that representatives who've come from different groups think that that is a good alternative, because I do agree that one of the struggles we're going to have is whether rubbish comes out of our bags. So I've got one of the old style Hessian bags for my plastics. I think my whole road do, and after every collection there's a load left, isn't there? So the firmer the container, I find the less likely we're going to have to do follow-up litter picks afterwards. So that's really good. I would certainly be in favour of us exploring something like that for the like the larger food waste option that you mentioned for paper and card as well. For that reason, I find the stronger the container, the better the collection. I do take on board what you're saying about having to drag it through a property. But I think we need residents to be sensible about how they're filling them as well. And I think as long as we're really clear about the option for a second or even a third box based on your need, based on your household needs, and I think the easier it is for these to be stored outside, i.e. the more robust they are, the better as well, because my plastic recycling lives outside and the Hessian bag is in bits, whereas a plastic box like that would survive, I think. So is there any other feedback before I just kind of sum up based on Councillor Rice?
Just a very short one. I think education and implementation is absolutely key here. I am concerned that a one size fits all, which is always the best way in terms of trying to buy these things from capital costs, is going to be difficult in certain areas. So it may be having to bear with things and bringing in or introducing change slowly in certain areas, because I can't see it easily working, say, for example, in my area, in the city centre, as well as it might do in the suburbs, because these will be kicked over, they'll be stolen, they'll be moved, and there'll be a lot more glass on the street than there is currently now. But at the moment, you've got a green bag that holds everything in it. And unless you're going to rip that open or something, the stuff isn't coming out. Whereas the stuff will come out of here 100%. Students was a rule, or anybody else in the community who lives in housing occupation or in sort of flats, they're going to have to put this outside somewhere. And I think it will get spilt potentially. So it's just being an education campaign and looking at it and being flexible about the number of boxes that people are allowed to have as well. I think will be key.
Okay, thank you. So I will come back to you to just kind of respond to any of that or sum up, but I think what I'm hearing is there would be some benefit to perhaps looking into piloting across different areas if that's a feasible thing to happen. Concerned about the potential safety of having glass in an open top box, but as you've mentioned, there's a number of other local authorities out there that we can kind of learn from their example on how they've managed that, and then that education piece about how we encourage people to think sensibly about how they use their recycling provision. I don't know whether any of the three of you want to come back on any of those points.
I think maybe just very quickly, I think that's really useful feedback. And I think we can definitely explore a trial for the rollout to learn from that. We've already spoken about having mock-ups made of a lidded box for the paper and card to see how that compares with the Hessian sack. At the same time, we can also explore the practicality of having a lid on the cans and glass if it's hinged, and to see whether that would be considered necessary and effective. So yeah, so we've got plenty to take away. I think I'm really grateful for the opportunity to present to you and to have all the feedback.
I think we could all, with your fears, customers, we have black bags and green bags kicked all over the place anyway. So it's nothing new, but I'm sure we can go back and think about, have a fill line so that they're not overfilled. So that may help the residents and the carriers, obviously, in future.
No, just to echo Councillor Anderson's comments. So this is an issue potentially in a number of areas with the green bags, as you know yourself in Uplands here anyway, which is not an excuse not to look at alternatives and just stick with the single-use bags when we're using 10 million a year. So. But valid points, and specifically, we could certainly, I would be supportive of a potential trial if that's an option, with the depending on the capital costs, but we'll explore those options anyway. So. And just to add as well, Chair, this same again goes with the food caddies. Now they are there, and sometimes they can get kicked over, or there can be some ESB in particular, or things like that. So these issues do happen, but it's not necessarily an excuse not to do something. That's all.
Lovely. Well, we've given that one a really good look going over, haven't we? So thank you ever so much for coming in, and thank you in particular. You are very welcome to stay for the rest of the agenda. I always say this, but you are not obliged to. So thank you ever so much. The next item on our agenda is a presentation from Ben George, who's come from Transport for Wales today. We've invited Ben because later in our work programme in the year, we will be looking at Swansea's sustainable transport strategy, and I think it's really helpful for us to understand the context. I don't know whether, did you want to give any introduction, Councillor Stevens, or will I hand over to Ben?
Very brief from me, actually. I'll hand over to Ben actually for the ins and outs of the presentation. Just to preface really and say that this has a lot of positive impacts, benefits for the Swansea and the region as well. So in terms of our sustainable travel goals and making sure that we can have a affordable and good public transport system. So but I'll hand over to Ben really on the ins and outs.
Okay, so showing my slides, hopefully they'll appear shortly. A few things to highlight, I suppose, before I leap in. One is, I suppose, to clarify for those of you who've had the meeting papers beforehand. the purpose of the disclaimer on the front sheet. So apologies if that's caused you any panic before the session. So it's a standard disclaimer. Essentially, it's obviously going to disseminate a lot of information to you shortly as part of this presentation. The slides that are contained in the slide deck are obviously reasonably compelling, and the disclaimer is just to encourage outside agencies to liaise with Transport for Wales before those are reproduced in other forums and settings. But really, I wouldn't want that to in any way malign your ability to go and undertake advocacy and be good political representatives for the projects described today, because South West Wales has got a number of really compelling and strong projects coming forward, and compelling not only in a regional setting, but as part of the Wales National Programme for Investment. And whilst I can do my work in establishing business cases and creating those compelling cases, it relies very much on the local and regional political advocates to see these things come to fruition and push for the case for the significant investment that's required to realise these projects. The other thing to mention before I leap in as well is, obviously, notwithstanding what's on your forward programme, the guidance for the regional transport plans landed at the end of last week. So that should very much complement your work. And I suppose I would probably envisage that regional transport plan would sit above. I suppose if you were going to look at sustainable transport as a subset, as a specific issue, that would presumably fall out of the RTP. The regional transport plan is quite old at this stage. I think it's probably eight years old and 3 years past its term deadline because of the consequences of COVID. And I suppose the other thing to highlight to you as local councillors, if you're not aware, is that when that policy was refreshed back in 2015, it was a refresh of a policy that was enacted in 2010. So you're looking at a policy which is actually quite old now in content and substance. And if you go and look through the regional transport plan for South West Wales, which is, well, the joint local as it is now, it makes very little mention of things like electric cars, for example, because if you wind the clock all the way back to when it was being developed, electric cars was something of a novelty, whereas, thankfully you wouldn't say that now. So there are a number of things which I think we would all agree are fairly mainstream issues now, which we haven't really got a settled position on. So I'm not speaking to any of those issues today. Transport for Wales is more than happy to come and work with any of the local authorities and assist you with the transport planning and the transport modelling that's held in TFW, and to give you advice and hold your hand through that. But there's quite a sizable piece of work there. And I suppose just as councillors working in this space, for you to be aware, if you haven't already seen that guidance, the first deliverable on that is the development of an implementation plan. So that's saying, how are you going to get after this task? And that's to be delivered to Welsh Government by 31st of October, which I suppose when you bake in everybody's leave over the summer, that's not a huge amount of time. And then ultimately, there's a number of steps. I won't go through this in exhaustive fashion today, but ultimately the policy is then to be adopted and handed over to Welsh Gov by June of 2025. So that feels, I think, like a reasonable amount of time. But there's, given how long it's been since this has had a proper shakedown with the public, there's an awful lot of work to be done there. So, the earlier you're able to start, the better. In terms of my my presentation today, we was discussing before the session started that metro stands as the sort of standout word here, and it can obviously sometimes be an unhelpful word. It works, you'll see it works well in some of the project areas, but not in all. And so I think the best way to describe this to you today is Transport for Wales, in partnership with local gov, is dealing with the bigger strategic projects, the cross-boundary projects, the projects where you're dealing with transport infrastructure that's not devolved to local government, such as rail, for example. And you'll see in the programme I'm going to show you that broadly encompasses what these projects are. It's trying to do the bigger things, the more complex things, the things where perhaps we're joining the dots between you and neighbouring local authorities, but it's very much a partnership affair across the public sector. And without further ado, I'll hit onto my first slide. So I've divided this in half to deal with rail and then bus. Happy to take your questions as we go. Broadly speaking, then we've been developing a rail programme over a number of years now. In fact, I started this piece of work as an employee of Swansea Council, working on behalf of the region. I was here for a number of years, as many of you will be aware. And we were working up then a whole raft of rail investments and testing them through a business case process. And so what you're seeing here is the culmination of a number of years' work, which broadly described deals with increase in rail frequencies in West Wales in terms of the blue shaded area. South Wales mainline improvements, that's the yellow line, so these are your long distance London services. On the green marked stations then, interchange improvements, and in the red area, which is obviously of greater interest to us today in this setting, looking at establishing a Bay Area metro. So this is about dealing with more local journeys, picking up communities that currently don't have access to rail connectivity and leveraging the little bits of rail infrastructure that we do have that aren't presently being used. And all this went through public consultation back in 2021. We had about 30 schemes and we were sifting them out and doing a lot of business case working to show for every pound of investment you put in the public sector sense, what benefits can we accrue from that back out the other end. So we've established then that these are projects that stand on their own 2 feet. This project, this slide, put the English slide on for you for ease, was presented to the Corporate Joint Committee and the subcommittee to the Corporate Joint Committee in the last fortnight to 3 weeks. There's an awful lot of information on this, so I'd encourage you to just have a look at the slides after the session. Perhaps happy to take questions obviously today, but what this is trying to show you in summary is for the railway stations across South West Wales, and you'll appreciate this isn't an exhaustive representation of those stations, the sorts of travel demand that you have at those stations. So you'll notice then Swansea stands out as being conspicuously quite a large station with 1.5 million trips, and that's down from about 2 million trips pre-COVID, so we're still in a position of recovery. And then you've got, obviously, if you look at, say, Fishguard, only 11,000 trips a year. So we're dealing with vastly differing levels of demand. But obviously, as you'll appreciate, for places like Fishguard, the issues of rural peripherality are really significant, so it doesn't diminish that there's only 11,000 trips there a year. But the things to pick out then are the relative levels of demand. You can see then where it says TPH, trains per hour, that's how many trains an hour on average. It's not an exact science, I'm trying to summarise here, how many trains an hour are running through those stations. So your opportunity to make a journey from there, and obviously if you've got anything above 4, generally you're getting into sort of turn up and go territory, you're not having to consult timetables. The green box below is where we think we can get those numbers to if we deliver these investments that I'll describe to you in a moment. So it's quite compelling and broadly represents a doubling of the rail frequency across the network. And then the coloured lines are the different route options which make up those trains per hour. So if I pick out one of the routes we're looking at is Command to Fishguard. We've got another route then that's running Swansea to Pembroke Dock. And so when you piece all of these various business cases together in concert, that's how you get these green coloured numbers. The other thing to flag on here, it was also discussed before the session started, is the role of Grand Union trains. I can talk to that in more detail. I'm not going to touch on it in too much detail in my presentation, only because it represents only 5 trains a day. So whilst it's very much welcomed, it's of significant value, does different and interesting things in this part of the world, it's a minority relative to the other things that we're working on here. So in the Swansea Bay area then, and this is then sort of focusing in, so we're not dealing with South Wales mainline services to West Wales or frequencies to West Wales. This is just how do we leverage and make improvements for the urban conurbation that is Swansea Bay. And obviously from my perspective, I'm able to take a slightly broader view, taking in, you know, Llanelli and Neath Talbot and sort of looking past those local authority boundaries. We're dealing with then an urban agglomeration of about 450,000 people, so it's quite a chunk of the population in South West Wales. And I think the things to pick out for you here is, and I won't presume you've got excellent knowledge of the rail network in this part of the world, so if you were to get a train to London, so one of the GWR services, you'd be travelling on the line that would be marked on here, where you've got Neath, Port Talbot's just off the page, Neath into Swansea, and then out, oh sorry, put the English slide on, out to Gowerton, Llethley, Pembrey and Bury Port. So that's South Wales main line. The line that's running up then Pontarddulais and Ammanford is called Heart of Wales line that goes up through mid Wales. The line that's of particular interest to us in this part of the world is the Swansea District line. So this is the line where you've got Pontllew, Velindre, Morriston, Llansamlet, Llandarcy. You'll see this railway line if you're travelling down the M4 and you look out with your window, you'll see it at a number of the junctions, a railway line. It's that line there. And at the moment, it's broadly used for freight movements only, with steel coming out of Tata Steel Port Talbot heading over to Llethley, but quite light traffic. And it's that line then which also has a lot of Swansea's northern suburbs bordering it and bordering the M4. And it's for that reason that it produces a very, very positive business case for investment, because you've got huge populations with no rail access presently. And so it's very easy to make a compelling case then for investment. Now, the numbers involved are still quite considerable, but in terms of when you look at Wales National, essentially the routes that I'm showing to you on here, I would say with the exception of the red routes, which I'll touch on in a minute, are basically the third best performing schemes in Wales. The top two are the Burns Commission stations in South East Wales, which you may have seen in the press, and then the Cardiff Bay Rail Metro project, which is funded and underway. And so really, from my perspective, this project is the top unfunded project ready to go next, and really is reliant and needing political support and people banging the drum to get it going. So we're working our way through the buildability and feasibility, and I'm pleased to say we've demonstrated that all this can be built, because that wasn't a settled matter, because a number of these stations are in challenging locations, but it can be built. We're refining the costings and we're refining it down to single option. Whilst that's going on, we're looking to make compelling cases to the UK government then for the funding needed for it. And obviously we're in constrained circumstances at the minute. There's an awful lot of work to be done, but I'm quite optimistic that given we've got a number of years of development yet to go, that if we can spend 2 years doing that and start stacking up the political advocacy needed for it at the same time, that those two things have got a reasonable chance of coalescing at the end of that period. The other routes, just to pick out on here then, are the red tram train routes. So we need to really highlight, because tram train, particularly in the Swansea context, always everyone gets a bit misty-eyed about it and they start thinking of mumbles. So it's got a very compelling case, tram train, in terms of this Fabian Way alignment. It's a huge amount of money, probably £600–700 million. But because of the levels of development on Fabian Way, it has continued to pass through the development cycles. To be totally honest with you, as a programme manager, starting off on this, I was expecting it to have fallen by the wayside because of how complex and costly it is. But such is the compelling case for Fabian Way and the untapped need and demand there, that it's continued to perform quite well. So it's a nice problem to have, but it is a longer term issue. So I think really I need you to focus on the green and the yellow option. If we can get those done, then really I'd say we're buying the right to get after these more complex projects that require tram train. I suppose just to be really clear, what I mean by that is that you'd have a physical rail connection coming out the front door, well, that's perhaps not a great image to give you, out the front door of Swansea High Street station. So you'd have tracks coming out onto the streets with trams then running through the city centre down onto Fabian Way and then rejoining the rail network at Swansea Docks, where it currently terminates. So you're joining those 2 points and then having onward travel to Aberdulais and potentially over to Clydach as well. So it's complex in terms of the engineering. It's complex because obviously there aren't trams running on Swansea streets presently. And I must say the administration here have been very generous in having some quite open discussions on how that might be achieved, whilst there's a lot of regeneration going on, and we're certainly not wanting to sort of unseat or complicate matters, but we're thankful to the administration and to the officers for their candour in recent months. Before I move on, does anybody want to ask any questions on these, or shall I keep going? No, I'll keep going. Okay, right, on to bus then. I can come back to these. So I think on the rail side, there's an element to which, aside from political advocacy, you can leave that to us. That's a TfW and a DfT and a Network Rail issue and a Welsh Government issue to be getting through. Bus really does need the cooperation and collaboration with local government and local operators. So I'm not quite in a position to present you with the finished article today, but I'm just going to talk through this in broad fashion as to what we're trying to achieve. So without getting into too much complexity, we're obviously in a privatised arrangement with bus operations, with private companies tendering or operating commercial routes, and that's performed reasonably well, but I think we're certainly seeing the cracks in that arrangement post-COVID. And I'm sure for you as councillors, I know you as councillors, have to deal with the complexities of buses not running where you'd want them to and vice versa. And so Welsh Government have set out in recent years an intention to franchise the bus operations in Wales. There's still plenty of water that needs to go under the bridge on that and for us to work out the complexities. But I think more increasingly, the operators are accepting of the fact that things need to change and a franchise system might give us a better opportunity. And so as we move through the various legal reforms that are required to realise that, some of my colleagues in the bus planning team are looking at the bus networks we've got on road now and saying, what's wrong with them? Where do they need to be? How do you start unpicking a bit of a rat's nest of routes that have developed and evolved over years into something that's a bit more coherent? And so what I'm trying to sort of just show to you on the slide here is that we've gone through a baselining of all the routes in Wales. So because when I was working here in the council, these routes change so often, it would be in the mind of one of the officers in the local authority as to where those routes were, but we couldn't show you as councillors where they were or try and explain them. So TfW have now got systems in place that do that on a dynamic basis. And then with the transport modelling capabilities that TfW have got, we've gone through and said, well, what should it look like? Now, what I would say with that is that network exists. Some of your officers have seen early versions of that network. It's obviously not going to be 100% correct from day one, but I would say probably from what I've seen, 80% of it is correct. And what we then need to do is sit with your public transport managers and say what's wrong with it and pick it out. And some of those will come down to local political issues where in your community, if you just take the bus and send it 2 minutes up there, Mrs. Jones will be much happier. But there's going to be compromise here as we seek to draw efficiencies to get these buses running faster, because we're trying to do too much with too little presently. A lot of my work is dealing with bus corridors where we used to have a fast bus that went straight through and was great if you were commuting into town, and you also had the other bus that went all around the little cul-de-sacs in and out to service people's needs. And we're trying to do both of those things with one bus now, and so it's trying to get into a slightly more efficient arrangement. So I must say public transport officers have been very cooperative, very helpful in those discussions thus far. They've been slightly diverted by the bus emergency scheme issues in recent weeks, which have been very complex. But again, credit to your officers, they've been very generous in navigating that, as have the operators. But now that we're, or hopefully, on a slightly more level footing for the next couple of months, we're going to try and get back into this issue and start airing what could these networks look like. And I think it'll have particular value to you, again, coming back to both your sustainable transport policy and the regional transport plan. It'll be something for you to have a look at and say, does this deliver value to the travelling public? Is it something we can realise? What are the challenges, etc.? And what can the local authorities do to improve that? And really, then the end of this slide is talking about, in conjunction with Transport for Wales, how do you get the bus and the rail to talk to each other? It kind of does now, but we haven't got all the levers to make it absolutely seamless. And so it's both a timetabling issue, it's also a ticketing issue. So there's areas in Wales now where we're piloting integrated ticketing. So you buy one ticket, you can do your bus and your rail journeys across multiple operators from one ticket, which has always been the holy grail. It's monstrously complex, but there are promising signs that we're starting to make some forays into that because of organisations like Transport for Wales being able to cut through. You could never do it as a local authority because it breaks down at your borders. So that's all looking quite positive, but the detail needs to follow now in the next couple of months. I will skim over this slide. It's the same sort of thing. So just to touch then on a practical investment that we're currently working on in the Swansea Bay area. So under Net Zero Wales, there's a policy target that all of the public transport service buses are to be decarbonised by 2035. You will appreciate from your own practical experience, that's a huge number of buses to get sorted in quite a short space of time. There's a number of electric buses operating in Cardiff and Newport. There's a few now running in on the Carmarthen to Aberystwyth route as shown on this slide, but otherwise they're diesels of varying degrees of cleanness or dirtiness, depending on how you look at it. So we've not really started to scratch the surface on this. So Transport for Wales is currently going through a process where it's electrifying the Traws Cymru bus network. So that's the national bus, because it's more within our gift to do that. So that's on an accelerated programme. I believe they're expecting that to be done by 2026. That's quite ambitious. But that is nevertheless the target they're currently working to. But in these orange areas shown on plan here, the Welsh Government have asked us to look at hydrogen fuel cell buses in these areas. The reason for that is because battery electric vehicles do have an operating envelope, and beyond certain mileages and within certain topographies, they start to become quite inefficient. And you need more vehicles than you would have otherwise needed if you had a diesel vehicle to do the same cycle. And in those sorts of scenarios, hydrogen fuel cell buses essentially give you the same operational capacity. And we think that in broad transport planning terms, you would need hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles for about 20% of your fleet demands. So I'd encourage you as councillors not to think of this as a binary, are we buying electric or are we buying hydrogen? It's probably a bit of both. And I'm talking to you about bus, but I think even your own fleet requirements as a local authority are quite considerable. With your bigger fleet vehicles, from the research that we've been doing at TfW, going to speak to other authorities around, well, not just Wales, but across the UK and England and Scotland as well. There are a number of vehicles within the fleet that just cannot be done with an electric vehicle. Your refuse collection vehicles in particular really struggle. I believe you've trialled that here in Swansea, and having spoken to, I think, Bridgend, Pembrokeshire certainly, they're trialling these vehicles and just saying for their, and it will be different by local authority, but for their particular needs, those battery electric vehicles are just not cutting the mustard. And so they're saying, well, if we've set these net zero targets, does that mean I'm buying, 3 electric vehicles to do a duty cycle and you've got to then find 3 drivers? Or am I buying a diesel one? Because at the minute I can't do hydrogen, the infrastructure's not there. So we're hoping that these projects will not only get the buses onto a hydrogen footing, but start to turn the wheel on the hydrogen economy to enable your wider fleet needs. So on this slide, this is just highlighting, I suppose, why we've looked to target this in Swansea Bay. Swansea Bay's running ahead of the pack at the minute, and we're sort of optimistic we can get this onto a delivery footing shortly. So the things to pick out is there's a number of conspicuous centres of hydrogen research around the Bay, across 3 or 4 academic institutions. The Gateway to Zero site then at the end of Fabian Way is being led by Swansea University. It's being built on land owned or leased to them by the Welsh Government. That will be an electric only forecourt. They've got outline planning with Neath Talbot for that at the minute, and we're in discussions with them as to whether a hydrogen refuelling station can be realised as part of that project as well. And then from a Transport for Wales point of view, we're looking at a number of sites on Fabian Way. We've been looking in the Enterprise Park as well, working with mainly Swansea and NPT in terms of the tangibles, about establishing a hydrogen specific depot, and bringing then 20 hydrogen fuel cell buses into operation. We're hoping by the end of 2025 to again start turning the wheel on all the infrastructure you need to get this stuff going. I think if you, again, coming back to your refuse collection vehicle issue, part of the reason as to why you can't trial that in Swansea at the minute is you haven't got a pipe that hydrogen comes out of in enough volume or enough quantity to make it anything more than a novelty. And so we're really hopeful that this project will create a significant daily demand for hydrogen at the right pressure in the right quantity, that will not only service this project, but then allow you and neighbouring authorities and, you know, fire service, etc., to say, oh, okay, we can look at this as well. There's also obviously the conspicuous issue of the M4, that gateway to zero site in particular then becomes an asset to HGV movements on the M4 corridor as well. It's part of the Trans-European network, so you get obviously the Irish traffic out to the ferries. So, and because you get so much greater mileage out of a hydrogen vehicle, you can space your infrastructure more broadly. So this would be the end of the chain for now. It would seem that would be sort of Swansea, Mega, Swindon, and so on. You know, so it's a different kettle of fish to electric. And I think just, you know, as I sort of draw this to a close and a conclusion, if you think about this in terms of battery electric vehicles broadly can handle a duty cycle of about 200 to 250 miles a day, which will do the majority of your needs. Hydrogen fuel cell vehicles can do about 600 miles a day now. So, you know, it is, and obviously the refueling times are far more similar to a conventional fueling cycle if you're using, you know, diesel. You know, it is a pipe, it goes in there, and 4 minutes later you're done. You're not having to factor in those charging cycles. So there are a number of things that are compelling and interesting with it, and we're sort of pleased to be able to get that off the ground in Swansea shortly. And it'd be very interesting then to work with local authority, yourselves and Neath Talbot, to make the most of that and to really sweat it. Oh, before I move off, the little blue dot to the left of Swansea on this plan is there's a blue plaque on the wall of Swansea Central Police Station, commemorating that Sir William Grove invented the hydrogen fuel cell in 1842. So there's plenty of tunes to be played on this, and hopefully ribbons to be cut as well, whilst we remember his legacy now all these years later. Won't dwell on this. That broadly explains how the project's going to be set out, but hopefully that's helpful. Happy to take questions and dip back through the slides as you wish.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ben. I will open up for questions. I'm conscious we've got another presentation to receive today. So if people have questions, great, but I also heard your willingness to receive questions after, when people have had perhaps a bit of time to digest that wealth of information that we just received. Did you want to come in, Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, I just want to come in on particularly the fuel cell and the close links we got within Swansea. You know, Councillor Robert Francis constantly tell us that the fuel cell was invented here, and we want to make the most of it. And I give a commitment in council last week that the leader is actively working on a rail network and looking at certainly looking at hydrogen solutions. And we're more than happy to work with Welsh Government on that issue to try and get more and more, you know, of us working together on hydrogen, because it's affordable. When we're doing it in partnership, it's far easier and far more sustainable going forward. One thing that encouraged me was the test bed that we've already tried with South Wales Transport. We've already had a hydrogen bus working in Swansea for some time. It was a pleasure to be on that bus, right, and see that it's been put through its paces, and have feedback from individual drivers who said, "Oh my God, it's no different. In fact, it's far better. We're using we sucking in dirty air and putting clean air out." It was a pleasure to be on the bus. We done a very short spin around the enterprise zone, but everybody talked about how good it was, how sustainable it was, and it takes exactly the same time to fill a fleet, because obviously they're doing this in mass. So they're saying it takes about 13 minutes to fill a diesel from start to finish, and it takes probably slightly less to fill a hydrogen bus. So it is the way forward, but I think that mixed approach is probably right. I know Councillor Andrea Lewis herself works very closely on the fleet procurement, and it's great to see we're on that journey. And I'm really encouraged that you know, green energy is finally here. So, and we're actually experiencing it at the moment. So, Ben, thanks for all the help that you are giving us. I know the leader's very keen to progress on all these issues.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you for that presentation. It was really useful to know all those things and see it's progressing. One thing I just wanted to ask you, Ben, if I could, is the time frame on some of these issues. I think on your presentation there were yellow and green lines, but the one that I'm looking at here is the Pontarddulais to Neath line and the Swansea up to Neath area and across the net. So what sort of timescale are we looking at for the delivery of these new stations, these new lines?
So, oh, sorry. Thank you. Thanks for the reminder. So we're currently working through the single option selection phase for these. So for each of the new railway stations and the associated infrastructure required, we've essentially got to a position where we have 3 options for each, so we know they're buildable. We're working through that. The yellow line, Pembrey and Buryport through to Swansea with the new station at Cocket, requires the least amount of investment and additional infrastructure to realise it. Essentially, obviously you need a station at Cocket. Yeah. So we'll sort of dust the cobwebs off that. And then at Pembrey and Buryport, you need some track to turn the train around. That's probably deliverable within, well, if we sort of presume the funding matter is settled, that's probably a 3-year project. The funding is not an insubstantial issue though. And then similarly for Ponte de Lys into Swansea, we believe that's a 5 to 7 year project to realise that. I mean, I think it does come down to money. And at the minute, the rail sort of pot in terms of not just Wales, but the UK is quite difficult. So we're going through a prioritisation exercise in Wales. But again, I'm quite pleased that we've kept the programme tight in South West Wales. We haven't got a lot of white noise or white elephants, I suppose, in the programme, which makes it easier to keep these things in focus. And that's why I'm really keen for you as local councillors, members of the public. We've just got to keep parroting the same thing, not get drawn off into too many tangents, but it's that sort of time frame.
Thanks very much. There isn't anybody else indicating, but you have given us a lot of information.
Yeah, that's fine.
So just a reminder to members of the committee that we are looking at sustainable transport strategy in our October meeting. There's plenty of time for you to think of any questions that we might need the answers to before then, and we'll get those to you if that's okay. But thank you ever so much for coming today and for such a comprehensive presentation as well. Okay, I'm going to move us on then to our final substantive agenda point, which is our local nature recovery action plan for Swansea. So again, we've asked officers to come today to give a bit of a kind of where we are, a bit of a background presentation, because we will be receiving the action plan to consider for endorsement in our September meeting. So over to Councillor Hopkins, did you want to introduce the item?
Yeah, I just want to say a lot of just great. Well, it's lovely to welcome Deb back. She's been up for some time with I know with the fracture. So welcome back. I don't want to take any more of your precious time, other than I'm sure that Deb will be supported by Christina Derrick, and also I believe that Mark Barber is also supporting her in today's presentation. And I know behind the scenes they've done a lot of work in Deb's absence, but it's always great to see her back. I don't know whether Paul is going to come in as well. Can we got Paul Miller on site? But I would guess Deb would be leading on this.
Okay, thanks. Over to you, Deb, I think.
Okay, I won't say very much because I'm conscious of time, and Christina is the one that's been really doing most of the work on this, and she'll explain the detail in the presentation. But maybe just by way of introduction to say that, you know, we had a local biodiversity action plan many years ago, which is now well out of date, and as a bit like Ben was saying with transport, you know, so much has changed in that time with legislation declaring climate and nature emergencies, and with the Welsh Government initiatives for the Wales Nature Recovery Action Plan. So, you know, we've had to really kind of review the way that we're working, and we've got additional resources, which fortunately means we've able to employ Christina and Mark to update our our biodiversity action plan and to create a new nature recovery action plan for Swansea. So I think probably if I leave it at that, because Christina will explain the background and where we've got to so far, if that's okay, Chris. I don't know if you're able to share your screen.
Yeah, I'll share my screen now. Can everyone see the screen just before I start presenting?
Yeah, that's come up for us in the room.
Yeah, cool. So as Deb said, I'm here to give an introduction to the Swansea Local Nature Recovery Action Plan. So I'll start with providing some background information for context. I'll then give an overview of the content and then conclude with talking about how the plan will be used. So firstly, before we talk about Swansea's Local Nature Recovery Action Plan, I need to start with what a Local Nature Recovery Action Plan, or LNRAP as I'll refer to it from now on, is. So an LNRAP in general identifies the priorities for nature recovery at a local level, and it is intended that each local authority and national park in Wales produce one. They are partnership plans produced by the relevant local nature partnership in the relevant local authority region or national park. And because they are partnership plans, they are relatively high level and are intended to guide LNP partner actions towards common goals. So in our case, the Swansea LNRAP is produced by the Swansea Local Nature Partnership. And as a bit of a background to the Swansea Local Nature Partnership, it was established originally back in 1999, then being known as the Local Biodiversity Partnership. And it's currently an active group with representatives from many organisations, including relevant public sector bodies, third sector conservation organisations, voluntary conservation groups, landowners, and professional and amateur naturalists. And for example, in our group, we've got representatives from various council teams, including some councillors. We have staff from NRW, the Wildlife Trust of South and West Wales, the National Trust, Pemllöger Valley Woods, the Orchard Project, Swansea Community Farm, and more. The LNP meets quarterly via Teams for updates, and this year we've also been meeting on site visits to share ongoing project work, network, and collaborate. And partners and individuals in the Swansea LNP are united by an interest in conserving, enhancing, and raising awareness of nature in Swansea. We currently have over 50 member organisations, over 100 people on the mailing list, and it's open to anyone to join. So having given a very brief view of what an LNRAP is, I should talk about where they originated as a policy tool. So the drive for LNRAPs in local regions stems from the Nature Recovery Action Plan for Wales, which was originally published in 2015 and then updated in 2020/21. It is the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan for Wales, and it sets out how the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity's strategic plan for biodiversity is addressed in Wales. It will, in time, be updated to reflect current global biodiversity policy, including the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which was ratified in December 2022, but this hasn't happened quite yet. So as it currently stands, the Nature Recovery Action Plan for Wales identifies the national approach to nature recovery, and it sets out 6 objectives for nature recovery in Wales, which are complemented by 5 themes of actions aimed at addressing issues that are driving declines in biodiversity and to support recovery. And I'll just briefly run through these for context now. So in terms of the 6 objectives, they are to engage and support participation and understanding to embed biodiversity throughout decision making at all levels, to safeguard species and habitats of principal importance and improve their management, to increase the resilience of our natural environment by restoring degraded habitats and habitat creation, to tackle key pressures on species and habitats, to improve our evidence, understanding and monitoring, and to put in place a framework of governance and support delivery. And then in terms of the 5 themes of actions, these are maintaining and enhancing resilient ecological networks, increasing knowledge and knowledge transfer, realising new investment and funding, upskilling and capacity for delivery, governance, mainstreaming and reporting our progress. So LNRAPs are then one of the delivery mechanisms to meet these national objectives in the local context. They're not statutory plans, but LNRAPs are indirectly promoted by the Welsh Government through the LNP Cymru project, which has established, or in some cases re-established, LNPs, so local nature partnerships, and LNP coordinators in all local authorities and national parks in Wales to create a nature recovery network. And one of the main responsibilities of these is being to coordinate, deliver and review LNRAPs. But aside or outside of policy drivers for LNRAPs, there's also a real need for them as a tool in nature recovery because we are in a nature emergency. So as most of you in this room will know, the Senedd and Swansea Council both declared nature emergencies in 2021. And in order to address this ecological crisis, there is a need for a variety of approaches across all levels. Collaborative landscape scale action is required, as well as the need to spread awareness and facilitate access to and engagement with nature. And the Swansea LNRAP as a tool and in its content aims to do this. Coming on to the Swansea LNRAP specifically, work has been ongoing for the past 14 months or so. Initially, we started with a policy and document review, including relevant evidence reports and other LNRAPs that had already been published. We then used that to guide and inform a draft framework, alongside guidance from LNRAP mentors in the LNP Cymru network. So this draft was reviewed by the Swansea LNP in July-August 2022, and 2 workshops were held with LNP members to discuss themes from the review in autumn 2022. Follow-up discussions were carried out with relevant LNP members at the start of 2023, and then comments from the review, the workshops and other materials were used to inform the redraft. And the redrafted plan was sent out to the LNP for review in June 2023, which brings us to now. And the LNRAP itself can be broken up into roughly 4 broad sections. So it starts with an overview of nature in Swansea and the need for nature recovery to set the context for the need for the plan. The information in this section was synthesised from a variety of sources, including evidence reports such as the state of nature, NRW technical reports, plus local evidence bases such as the South East Wales Biodiversity Record Centre, the Swansea Ecosystem Resilience Report, and of course the Swansea LNP. So for those of you who may not be familiar with nature in Swansea, I'll just cover some of the main points here. There is a huge diversity of habitats within Swansea that support a variety of species, and that includes upland moorland, grasslands, woodlands, wetlands, estuaries, coastal cliffs, as well as sand dunes and heathlands, and many of these are often only minutes from the city or other urban centres. And the marine environment around Swansea also supports intertidal boulder communities, honeycomb worm reefs, peat and clay exposures, subtidal sands and gravels, as well as blue mussel beds. Over 20% of the county area and much of the seas around Swansea are designated as protected sites for nature under law, and this includes 7 special areas of conservation, 2 special protection areas, 2 Ramsar sites, 28 biological or mixed sites of special scientific interest, 4 national nature reserves and 6 local nature reserves. And we also have 154 sites of importance for nature conservation. And these are non-statutory designations, but they are intended to have some protection from development through local planning policy, as their designation raises awareness and intends that nature is given due consideration in the land use planning system. However, although we have many examples of different habitats and species in Swansea, the exact state of nature is unknown due to lack of data, but what we do know often paints a worrying picture. So most of the county is of lower ecosystem resilience, shown here on the slides from an extract of the Swansea Ecosystem Resilience Report, whereby paler shades indicate lower ecosystem resilience and conversely darker shades indicate higher ecosystem resilience. In addition to that, species are declining, and even some of the best examples of nature, our protected sites, are often in poor condition. So, for example, NRW's Otter Survey of Wales, carried out between 2015 and 2018, identified that otter were recorded in 37% fewer places in Swansea compared to 2009. And declines like this are also true at national levels, with a 52% decline in average species abundance of butterflies in Wales since 1970, noted in the State of Nature report. And in terms of our protected sites, NRW's protected sites baseline assessment identified that 80% of protected sites in Wales were in unfavourable or undesirable state. So we've identified that nature is struggling, and the next section of the LNRAP, the so-called action themes, identify what can be done to rectify this situation. So the action themes are the backbone of the plan, and essentially they are the priorities for nature recovery in Swansea. The action themes are aligned at the top level with the 6 objectives for nature recovery identified in the NRAP for Wales, but influenced and guided by regional and local priorities identified from NRW area statements, relevant local community consultations, and the Swansea LNP. So it's important to note that the action themes themselves do not commit any specific partner in the Swansea LNP to any specific action. Instead, they're intended to direct partner actions towards common goals so that there's a coherent and landscape scale approach to nature recovery in Swansea. There are many action themes within the plan, I think about 25, as I said, nested under the 6 objectives in the NRAP for Wales, but I'll give 2 draft examples here to illustrate the linkages and give some context. Firstly, under Objective 1, that was to engage and support participation and understanding to embed biodiversity throughout decision-making at all levels. One action theme in the Swansea LNRAP is to provide accessible educational and awareness-raising events, in person and or online, and especially focusing on expanding the reach of these initiatives outside of people or groups already engaged in nature recovery and conservation. And then similarly, under Objective 3, that was to increase the resilience of our natural environment by restoring degraded habitats and habitat creation. One action theme in the Swansea LNRAP is to ensure that 30% of land and sea within Swansea is protected and effectively managed for nature by 2030. So hopefully you can see that the Swansea LNRAP action themes are more detailed than the 6 objectives for Wales, yet still broad enough to act as an umbrella for LNP partner actions. Now, following on from the action themes, the next section of the LNRAP provides further information on nature in Swansea. And this information was synthesised from previous work related to the old local biodiversity action plan, as well as from LNP workshops carried out in autumn 2022. We provide overviews of the main Section 7 habitats of principal importance and other habitats grouped under the headings of woodland, open water, wetland, heath and grasslands, coastal habitats, marine environment and the urban environment. Further information and links to certain species and sites that are special to Swansea are also provided, and it is intended that a summary of an audit of Section 7 species of principal importance will be included, but this isn't finished yet. And this section is intended to be a resource for information on nature in Swansea for everyone to use and refer to, and as such there are also links for further information included. So the 4th and final section then focuses on what people or members of the public rather than the LNP per se can do for nature recovery in Swansea. This information is provided by way of infographics with suggestions for actions. And these are not fully comprehensive lists, but rather some ideas to help lead people in the right direction. The ideas and suggestions were generated from other LNRAPs, input from the Swansea LNP, as well as existing biodiversity campaigns. And the infographics themselves also contain links to further resources. There is more detail in the draft, but some examples that I'll give here are to provide to give nature a home, for example, by installing bat or bird boxes, especially swift boxes, to make space for nature by making a wildflower meadow, planting trees or creating wetland features, to check your pollution, to fight climate change and more. And the ideas in the infographic have been split between what you could do at home, school, work, your community, or as a nature enthusiast to make it easier for people to interpret and apply to their own situation. So to summarise the last few slides, there are roughly 4 sections to the Swansea LNRAP, each focusing on providing context, guiding action, information and awareness raising. But the plan itself is more than just the content. In order for it to be effective, it needs to be used. And the main way we envisage the Swansea LNRAP is to guide partner actions towards nature recovery using the action themes. For example, within the council, as you all know, we have a Section 6 biodiversity duty under the Environment Wales Act 2016. And that is, we must seek to maintain and enhance biodiversity so far as consistent with the proper exercise of our functions, and in doing so promote the resilience of ecosystems. And a Section 6 plan is currently being drafted, which will set out more specific actions that the council will take over the next 3-year Section 6 reporting cycle. These actions will be directly guided by the LNRAP action themes, and so in this way, the LNRAP priorities for nature recovery will be translated into our actions as a council and partner of the Swansea LNP. And through the LNP, we intend to informally review partner actions towards the LNRAP, likely on an annual basis, so we can monitor progress and also identify any action themes that are potentially being over or under actioned. Regarding a formal review of the LNRAP as a plan, we intend this to be carried out by 2030 in line with likely national and global policy changes around that time with all of the 30 by 30 targets. And then, as has been made clear on other slides, we also intend the LNRAP to be a resource for the LNP and the public on nature and nature recovery in Swansea. So hopefully that has provided some insights into the Swansea Local Nature Recovery Action Plan. I think the plan is that we will send these slides and a copy of the draft PDF out after this meeting, and everyone is invited, should they wish, to provide comments by 10th of August. And yeah, if you have any questions, I can try and answer those now, or feel free to contact me directly via email.
Thank you very much, Christina, for such a comprehensive presentation. So prior to this meeting, speaking to officers, this is a really chunky piece of work, isn't it? And I think the draft plan, when it lands in our inboxes, is going to be several nights, if not weeks worth of bedtime reading for us. So I will open up to questions based on the presentation today, but I think the intention is for us to facilitate a more ongoing dialogue with officers about the plan before we get to the September the 4th meeting, where we'll be looking to endorse, because it will require quite a lot of engagement with it, really, for us to have a meaningful discussion in September. I've got a couple of questions, but I will open up to any other colleagues first. Is there anybody online? Oh, yeah, Councillor Rice.
Just a couple of quick points. Thanks for that presentation. It's great to see the work that's been done there. In terms of the LNRAP and its relationship with the local development plan, I think that's pretty key. Both of them are going through their formation at the moment, and I think it's important that we make sure that supplementary planning guidance or principles are put from one into t'other, and vice versa, so that we understand how they work together as a thing. And in terms of sort of local places for nature, I think it's really important that we keep doing that on a local basis. And my 7-year-old really pressed me to put a wildlife pond in the back garden, and successfully did that this weekend. I'm the least practical person you'll ever meet, but we did it. So everything is possible. So yeah, give it a go yourself as well.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, it's no coincidence that they sit under the same department. I would say that I meet with Paul on a regular basis, with Tom Evans, and we talk about all these issues related to the new LDP. And it is only right and proper that if you look at some of the supplementary planning guidance we already got, is there to protect as much as we possibly can. And they're not just words. We talk about many of these words today, about partnerships. We can't deliver it alone. And I totally agree with that. It is all about not doing it for the people, but with the people that we work with. So commitment is, yeah, we will, as this develops, and obviously it's not just a statutory obligation, but we will work in a true partnership to ensuring that where we can work with Habitat and new build wherever we can. There is always some degree of debate, because all of a sudden we find that the rarest type of fungi turning up on some occasions, as we have seen when we've been looking at certain other sites. So, but what I would say, we need to be realistic, and I still think there is a huge amount of benefit out of SUDS. If you look at the sustainable drainage systems, it's there for the right reason, and it could also be there to encourage habitat if managed in the right proper way. So there is always room for improvement, but we do work in partnership, and that's why we're in the same department.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I just wanted to ask about the 30 by 30. It struck me that it's one of the draft action themes that you've given, 3.3, ensure 30% of land and sea within Swansea is protected and effectively managed by nature by 2030. Just wanted to know what the word protected means in that context. Are you looking for, actual designation? And if so, is that something that Swansea Council would be leading on, or is that actually a Natural Resources Wales question?
Yeah. So at the moment, the wording does imply legal protection. That would encompass any of the protected sites that are statutory, so including SSSIs, the European sites, but also local nature reserves. So to give some context, I think currently, including Swansea County, so that is down to low mean water, we've currently got 21% of land area which is strictly protected. So that would, obviously that target would then be aiming for further 9% protected, and that could be that would likely be led by, as you suggested, either NRW or Swansea Council, as we are the ones responsible for the designation of the statutory sites. So one way that potentially that could be achieved, or partly achieved, it would be through potentially designating more local nature reserves, as they are one of the statutory protected sites.
Can I just add to that, Chris?
Yep.
I mean, you're absolutely right, and I think, you know, being a protected site doesn't mean it's necessarily in good condition and being managed, you know, properly. So there is that issue to look at, and that's where the ecological resilience mapping work that we did comes in. So it looked at, you know, what sites are in good condition, what sites are under active management. So we don't yet really know how far behind the 30 by 30 target we are in Swansea, and that's one of the next steps for us to work with. But I think critically the sites of importance for nature conservation, which are non-statutory sites, they provide the connectivity between the protected sites that really strengthen the resilience of those areas, and those are the sites we really need to focus on, and in the forthcoming planning policy Wales document are likely to be given slightly more protection. So, you know, we haven't got an exact target or an exact baseline yet, but we're working on that at the moment and see what we can realistically do. But the 30 by 30 is the Wales target, which we are trying to aspire to. But at the moment, you know, we might have to do a bit more work to revise our aspirations on that.
Thank you. That's really helpful to understand. Okay, I'm going to just take a temperature check from committee members about having some sort of working group meeting about this prior to the 4th of September to allow us to dig into some of those details. Are people up for that? If we can work with officers to get that. I'm conscious that it is the summer holidays, so I'll put a caveat on it that, you know, leave and whatever else. But I do think, you know, in order for us to have a meaningful discussion on the 4th of September, there's a lot of detail in this, isn't there, for us to go through. Okay, unless there's any other comments, questions, I'm going to leave all of that on hold then until we meet on this subject specifically, and move us on to our last agenda item, which is just our standing item on the work plan. So I have referred to this many times already this afternoon. So we've got the action plan coming back to us, and then we've got a bit more in depth on the waste strategy for the 4th of September, and then we've got just the sustainable transport strategy on the 16th of October, because I believe that will be a very chunky item. We want to give it due time for discussion. Okay, with that then, I will close the meeting. Thank you all for your attendance and engagement with the discussion. Pleasure as always.